2 more weeks. 2 more weeks and we're out here. I dislike this break being so late in the semester. Like, I always think a 1 week break, I'm going to come back all recharged, but all it does is make me say, 2 more weeks and we're done. It's too late in the semester. But anyway, we're gonna make it through this together. We're gonna do this. So, a reminder: if you haven't signed up for a presentation time, tonight is the deadline, and then I'll start processing the schedule. Ideally tomorrow. I'll get the whole schedule up and on the course website. Homework 4, I'm sure you're painfully aware of, is due Friday. And I just made a note on a post on Piazza. I have what I want to go through today. It might spill over into Wednesday, so we might take up like half the week doing the example that I want to do, which is taking a web app and deploying it out there with a domain name and everything. So we're going to get a domain name. If you want to pick a domain name, I'm open to suggestions. I'm going to buy one, and it's just whatever. Something I'm not going to end up using. I'm just going to waste $12 on it. So whatever you want, if you want to pick the domain name. So I'm going to go through that whole example of getting to going live with a web app. After that, I don't have anything necessarily planned. I have things like ideas rattling around that I would do, but it would just be whatever I think you'll want to see. So if you have suggestions, if there's something that you want to see, make a note on this post, vote on the posts that were made, and let me know what you want to see. I'm open to most things, especially if they're course related, but even things that aren't course related, I'm open to that as well. I'm open to homework help, project help, of course, would probably be the 2 big ones. Just extra things you want to see, or even if you just want to stay home on Friday, I'm open to that too. So make your posts. I'll check this before Wednesday's lecture and again before Friday's lecture to see what's going on. Whatever the highest voted one is, that's probably what I'll end up doing. I won't advertise this outside of lecture because I don't want people outside of lecture voting, even though 8 people saw it before right away. So maybe that's all of you, but someone outside of lecture probably voted. But I want the people who actually come to lecture to vote. Whatever you want on Wednesday and Friday. If not, I'll default to, my ultimate default is just going through the course material and just doing like a review of the semester, which is less valuable since we don't have an actual final exam, a cumulative exam where I'm testing you on all that stuff. But it can still be nice to brush up on things. That's my ultimate default. If nobody posts on this, that's what I'm going to end up doing. So if you want to see something other than that, let me know. A reminder, we have presentations coming up. I remind you to sign up for a presentation time, but when it does come to your presentation day, please make sure you're showing up on time. For the lectures next week, show up at the regular lecture start time. And don't be coming in at your presentation time. I've had classes in the past where they have a tendency to show up for their presentation time, do their presentation, and leave. It's just really distracting when you're coming in during somebody else's presentation, and then it's just kind of rude to leave early too. But make sure you're showing up on time for these, especially on this Friday. I know it's 8 a.m. It's early, but show up on time to this, please. I have 10 minutes slotted for each presentation, but if presentations don't take 10 minutes, we might end up getting ahead of schedule. And if you're showing up at your scheduled time, you might walk into an empty room. Especially if you have, like in an extreme example, if you have the last slot of the day and all the other presentations are done, we get ahead of schedule and I say, okay, team whatever, you're scheduled for whatever time, but we're ready for you now. Come and present. And everybody else presents and we got like an hour left at 10 a.m. I'm not sitting there waiting until 11:50 for that last team to show up. I'm out of there. I'm not waiting around. So show up on time. You are obligated to be there at 8 a.m. and I'm not going to strictly enforce that. And if you present on one of these other days, you don't have to show up on Friday. You don't have to show up on the final exam day at all. But technically, according to the university, you're obligated to be there. So if you're showing up at 11, at 10:50 or 10:40 or one of those last times, and you walk into an empty room, there's nothing I'm going to do for you there. So please show up on time, or at least well before your presentation time. So that's my fair warning. Hopefully people are watching the video and hearing that warning. Whoever needs to hear that, whoever signed up for those last slots. Sign up for the last slot doesn't mean you get an extra 2.5 hours to work on your presentation. It means you're just the last team to present during that time, during that day. I'm sure at least one team's going to do that. I hope I don't have to just cut somebody off, but I don't know. Yeah, don't show up at your scheduled time. Show up before then, please. Any questions about anything? And I have the connecting. Why am I not connected? Well, I have the Discord open, but maybe if I restart Discord. Yeah, looks like that worked. So I have the Discord open, especially if you want to make suggestions for a domain name. You can look at what domain names are available. Make sure you suggest something that's available. We can do that. All right, so let's do this. So I want to start with, close Piazza. I want to start with Digitalocean. So there are a lot of different options to get a service. So let me back up a little further than that. When you deploy your web app to the internet, one of the first things you need is a server, which isn't anything special. It's just a computer that's going to run 24/7. You need something running nonstop to be able to host your site. If it's not running nonstop, if it's got to restart for updates or whatever, your site's going to go down, and that's just no good. So there are a lot of options. You can buy your own server, host it at your house, and things like that. If you don't want to do all that, Digitalocean, this is what I like to use personally. If you have something else you like to use, go for it. This is not an endorsement of DigitalOcean, not sponsored or any of that. But I do like DigitalOcean. You give them $5 a month at the minimum, and you get what they call a droplet, but it's a fresh instance of Ubuntu, or there are other options. I always choose Ubuntu though. And you get root access and SSH access. And then you can do whatever the hell you want after that. So a lot of other services, they'll give you really stripped down access to the machine, to whatever you're hosting your site on. There'll be shared containers and things like this, shared VMs. DigitalOcean just says, here's your machine. They call it a droplet. I would assume it's a container underneath. And they just give it to you. Like, here, do whatever you want. You have root access. Do anything. So that's why I like DigitalOcean. It's just the freedom. There are a lot of niceties, I guess, in other services that you won't get here, which is, again, why I like it. It just says, here's your machine. You have SSH access with root permissions. Do your thing, which is what I like, because I like to get hands-on with all that stuff. I mean, I know what to do when I'm in the shell, when I'm in the command line. So that's exactly what I want. It's exactly what I'm looking for. That's exactly what DigitalOcean provides. DigitalOcean doesn't need to do anything else for me except give me that container. So I'm going to log into one of these. I'm going to go to my terminal, and I'm going to SSH into this. SSH. I have root access. I'm going to log in as the root user and log into my machine. So now I'm in my DigitalOcean droplet. I'm in the command line. And from here, it's everything I can do in Ubuntu, everything I can do with Linux. I can install things. I can do whatever I want. So this is why I like DigitalOcean. Once I'm in the container, and I have an IP and a static IP address, of course. So once I'm in the container, I can run all my apps. This is the container I actually use to run my course websites. So I have the CSE 312 course website, 442. Course Pages is the 116 website. I have Towers, if you played that in 116, if you remember that, if I even had Towers running when you took the course. That's at jessehartloff.com. We can play Towers. And the CC 115 site, which they don't use. I'm not part of 115, but I'm still hosting a site that literally just redirects to their Blackboard or Piazza, I forget what it is. I think it's out of date right now anyway. But if you go to CSE115.com, should coerce them into using this. It'll take you to the Piazza page. So anybody taking the course can go to CSE115.com and it redirects to whatever they're using that semester. But I don't think they advertise this at all, so it's kind of wasted, but I'm not giving up that domain name. So I'm going to keep that running here. So I have my apps running on this server. And you notice that I have these running just like we do for the homeworks. As in, I'm running these on ports, I mean, not exactly port 8080. Resize this. One more. Not exactly port 8080 like we did for the homeworks, but I'm running these on random port numbers. Obviously not random, I just named them after the course numbers. And then 9009 for this guy. That wasn't some magic trick that we did for the homeworks just to run in a dev environment. I actually use those ports in my production environment as well. Just kind of randomish high number ports. I don't use port 80, and I believe, I was thinking of this after Friday's lecture, last lecture, I believe I forgot to mention this with HTTPS, but HTTPS will default to port 443. I'm not using either ports 80 or 443. I'm also running a whole bunch of sites on the same server. So how are we going to do all this? And the answer to that is going to be Nginx. So I'm using Nginx as what we call a reverse proxy. So if I get to my Nginx settings, Nginx is a web server. I'm using it as a reverse proxy. It has many features. It can be used as a load balancer, maybe most commonly. But it's a web server, and this is what's going to listen on ports 80 and 443. So Nginx is going to be kind of my middleman. The Nginx is going to talk to the outside world for me, and all connections to my server are going to go through Nginx, and then Nginx is going to route to the appropriate port number for the app that's being requested. So with Nginx, I have a configuration file for each domain name that I'm using. Oh yeah, not Spring Break is what they chose last semester. For each domain name that I'm hosting. So for example, if we go to CC312, I have a configuration file which is going to say, listen on port 80 for requests to a server named cc312.com. So if I get a request on port 80 and the domain of that request is cc312.com, route it to HTTPS, because we don't want anybody connecting on port 80 using HTTP. And if we get a request on port 443 for cc312.com, then forward it to HTTP localhost at 8312 or 8312. So if we get this request, I'm getting an HTTPS request over the internet. Everything over the internet is encrypted. But as soon as it gets to my server, this connection here is going from Nginx to my app on the same, I'd have to assume physical box, but I guess I can't make that assumption with DigitalOcean. But in the same server, in the same droplet, using localhost, is anybody going to be able to spy on that? Like, I don't have to encrypt that. Right? It's in the same, probably the same physical box. I'm a little hesitant to make that assumption with DigitalOcean, but probably the same physical box. So once you get into a network that you can trust, because if somebody can, once you get to something you can trust, you don't have to necessarily encrypt. I mean, you could if you wanted to. We could encrypt this. It wouldn't be too hard to. But if somebody can observe that traffic on your machine, on your server, you're already screwed. Like, they already have everything. If they have that kind of access, they have access to my private key anyway. They have access to everything at that point. So there's really no benefit to encrypting here. And the benefit of not encrypting is when we write our web apps, we're not bogged down with thinking about encryption while you're writing your app. We're going to encrypt on a separate layer, and then everything's encrypted. Just like what I showed with HTTPS 2 weeks ago, where we just add that layer in front of the TCP socket, and then we don't think about encryption at all. We just use the TCP socket and make sure that socket is encrypting everything. We're doing the same thing here, where everything goes through Nginx. Nginx is our proxy to the outside world. Everything goes through Nginx, and Nginx is going to make sure everything's encrypted. We're going to make sure it's encrypted. If somebody tries to not be encrypted, we're going to redirect them to HTTPS. And then once it's local to our server, then we're not going to worry about encryption anymore, because we'd be screwed if they can read that conversation anyway. So I'm going to forward to the appropriate port. And just the way Nginx works, we have to send a few more headers if we want to make sure if we want to use WebSockets, the upgrade and connection headers. We have to make sure those are forwarded, or else we can't use WebSockets. So I always throw these two headers in there as well, or else WebSockets don't work. Even if I'm not using WebSockets, I just do that out of habit. And we can look at more. They all look the same. The only difference is going to be the port and the host. So what we want to do is add another site to this. And of course, if you only have one site, you just have one of these files. Everything else will be the same. Or you just use the default, which I deleted, because I don't want no default. So what we want to do is get a new domain name and host another site. Which brings us to, I got no suggestions. No, I don't want to update Java. Thank goodness. We got to get a new domain name. Yes? CSE 313. 313? Oh, no, it is already registered. Wait. Who the hell has CSE 313? Risky clicks there. All right, I guess we're not getting CSE 313. I don't know how that relates to CSE 313. How do they get from that name, that business name, to this? CSE 412. Any other suggestions? I'll go with 412, kind of the same spirit. Oh, I actually didn't expect that to be available. Even with 2 R's? I don't know, what do we think? Okay. Best website ever. Let's add this to our cart. Don't auto-renew this. You have the last 4 of my credit card. And we're going to buy that. So now we own that domain name. We own best site ever with 2 R's. And we have to set this thing up. So you notice I'm using DigitalOcean Droplet, but I just bought this domain through Google Domains. Don't worry, we have a plan. It's going to take a little bit to, for this thing to go. Meanwhile, I want to get this IP address. So what we want to do with domain names is set up our DNS registry. We want that domain name to map to our IP address, the IP address of our server. I'm still baffled that CC313 was taken. Now I can't create a course with that number. So we want that to map to our IP address. Why am I almost blanked for a second there? And I want to add this record. So I want to say, if we get a request, it should just default to that. I don't know why it even lets me type a different host name. Whenever I get a request for this host name, I want the DNS record to map to my DigitalOcean droplet. That should auto fill in. I don't feel like typing in. Yeah, I didn't feel like typing that in. And now whenever somebody requests for that site, it should map to this IP address. Now it takes a bit for the DNS to resolve. Everything needs to update. The internet has to do its thing. So it can take a little while to do this. But in hopefully the amount of time it takes for us to set everything else up, this will be mapping to our server. So if we go to best website ever right now, we shouldn't really get anything. Oh, we actually did. So it already updated. So this is Nginx, Ubuntu. That's definitely my stuff. If you go to some random domain name, like I know with 1 R, with 3 R's, I know that's available. You're going to get this. Can't be reached. But what I got was my 404 from my Nginx server. So I know that this is actually getting to my server already. So the DNS went like immediately there, which is nice. Possibly because I went through Google Domains and I'm using Chrome, possibly updates a lot faster, but who knows? I've had cases where one browser, I was doing a demo like this, one browser wouldn't update. I think I was using Opera and it wouldn't update right away. And I switched to Chrome and it did. I assume because I'm using Google Domains that Google Chrome is just going to update a lot faster. But anyway, we're already mapping to our site, so it's time to set some things up here. We're in Nginx. Let's do Nginx stuff first. I want to copy, let's see, CC312. So I want to create a new configuration file for this new website, the best website ever. I want to create a new configuration file, and I'm actually going to delete a lot of this. Oops. Not that much. Let me just go line by line. So I want to change the server name. I'm going to delete all of this. I didn't quite want that. I'm going to listen on port 80. And that's all I need, right? So I'm going to get this down to the bare minimum. I'm going to erase all that stuff that I didn't explain. And I'm going to listen on port 80. And I'm going to forward requests to these 313 right here. 8313. So we're going to forward to port 8313 whenever we get a request on 80. Close this. Restart Nginx. No, oh yeah, we wouldn't see anything different there. And we should be going to port, wait, shouldn't we? No, that is an error. I gotta, what's the error? It says unexpected closing brace, but where? How's that an unexpected closing brace? Thank you. Ooh, yeah, that's definitely it. The one line that I actually typed, I messed it up. Thank you. And Nginx-s reload. I always do. If you haven't seen this before, I kind of. By the way, anything that you see that you want more explanation, I mean, we have all week, so please ask questions if you have any questions. I did this exclamation point ng. If you do exclamation point and then start typing a command, it'll look through your history and look for the most recent command that you typed that starts with those characters. The only Nginx command I ever type, unless something goes wrong and I'm really debugging, is going to be Nginx-s reload, and I never remember what that -s is supposed to be. I know it's Nginx reload, I don't know. So I just do this, and it runs the last command that starts with ng, which is always going to be that. Even when I'm debugging stuff, I'm going to cap off my debug session with a reload. So I'm always going to get that. So I just hit it with that. And Nginx is set up. So this is Nginx. So this is something you would install. You would go through the Nginx tutorial, install Nginx, and then set up the configuration the way we did right there. And oh yeah, we should be able to see something different here. That gateway. Because it's acting as a reverse proxy for a port where nothing is hosted, nothing happened. It's going to give us that 500. All right, so now it's time to actually run an app. This is where we go to GitHub. I'm going to take the Python server, the one that we're setting up. Did I ever push? Oh shit, I didn't. You know what, I might abandon that plan. I never pushed, like I'm not really hosting anything there is the problem. And I didn't push the change that I made. Kind of wanted to avoid this because I did it last semester, but I'm just gonna host the CSE 312 website. Just because we need something. So I'm gonna take the CSE 312 website, grab this code. I haven't talked about GitHub at all, have I? So I like to, you've probably seen GitHub at some point in your careers by now, but just in case, I'm going to give a very brief overview. GitHub is a way to host, store our code and allow us to use Git, which is a way to use version control to be able to track all the history of our code and host it online. GitHub gives us a place to host all our code online. So I'm going to push my code to GitHub. I have my GitHub, my code hosted here, and then I'm going to go to my server and then pull from GitHub or clone, since it's the first time that I'm cloning this website. So that solves my question of how do I get my code on my server? I'm going to use Git and GitHub to do that. So I'm going to do git clone, and that's going to download all of that. Oh, of course it does. Oh my goodness, I can't type. So I have another copy of 312 on the server. I'm going to go to my Docker Compose file, change this to 8313. That has to match what we have in the Nginx configuration, or else Nginx isn't going to find our server. So I'm going to change that port. Make sure that took. And then Docker Compose up. Oh, I meant to hit that with the -D. And we're going to use Docker Compose, just like we've been using all semester. Well, I guess half the semester for Compose, but the other half for Docker. I'm going to run Docker Compose, run this app. Looks like Docker's smart enough that that's possibly using my other 312 images. Is Docker that smart? I think it is. Because it looks like it's not building the thing. Oh yeah, it's done. So there we go. I want to make sure I hit it with the -D. I want this running in the background. And you can see should be able to see. I think I'm just blind here. First pages, television, final. If I'm reading that right, it broke this site. Yeah, it did. It reused the container and and broke the actual website. Oh, God damn it. Now I forgot the -D. I can do this. I can do this. I think it's just too confused because I have two containers with the same name. But all my services are called app. How do I make it? All right, well, we're just going to do this and get what we get. If it breaks 312.com, I'll just change it later. I'll fix that later. Three. Yeah, apparently I can only have one just because I'm sharing so much. Docker's being a little too smart on this one. Anyway, so I have the site running. We have this a domain name that we just bought, forwarding to our Digitalocean droplet, which is running Nginx, listening on port 80 for connections, forwarding it to port 8313, sending the request there. That app is getting the request, returning the response, sending it to Nginx. Nginx sends it back over the internet, and we have our site running. Go us. Yes. One big problem, it's not secure. So let's fix this. Actually, we will get this done today. We won't have to spill over to Wednesday. One big problem, this isn't secure. This is where we're going to use our good friend, Certbot. So I showed this very briefly in an earlier lecture. But now let's talk about this proper. So Certbot is a free service that is going to let us get signed certificates for our sites. So we can get a signed certificate to be able to use HTTPS without having any warnings. We don't want a self-signed cert. That's what we did on last Friday. We had a self-signed cert. We got HTTPS, but we got all kinds of warnings because it wasn't signed by a certificate authority, and much less having a keychain that goes to a root certificate authority. Certbot is going to give that for us for free. There's no reason not to be encrypted these days when it's so easy. I believe there are rate limits. I haven't looked at it in a while. I believe there are rate limits. So if you have a very popular website, you have to actually fork over some money for a cert. But for any smaller sites, Certbot's here. Why not use it? Super easy to use. I'm using Nginx on Ubuntu 20. It goes through how to install. I won't go through the whole tutorial, but it goes through how to install Certbot, which is super easy. It was just a couple of lines that you paste into your terminal. And then you're going to run certbot -nginx. This script, so I already have the script downloaded, installed, and everything. Now I just run this thing. Oops. Let's type it in. And Certbot's going to look at my Nginx configuration and find all of the sites that I'm hosting. It's going to say, oh, you got a lot of sites here. What do you want here? I want best website ever. It's going to do its thing. It's going to set up challenges. It's going to host. It's going to change my Nginx configuration, host the site there, talk to its server. Its server is going to send challenges to make sure that I do, in fact, own this domain name, that it can get those challenges. And it worked. All those challenges passed, so it verified you actually do control this domain name. You're not just BSing me. You didn't just go to your Nginx configuration and say that you own google.com or something silly like that. We don't want anybody having a cert for a site that they don't own, because then they can perform a man-in-the-middle attack, which is the whole point that these certs are trying to prevent. So we don't want any of that. It's going to ask me one last question. Do I want to redirect or not? I definitely want to redirect. That means whenever I get an HTTP request for this domain, it's going to redirect to HTTPS. All that means is that it's going to go into my configuration and make some changes. Once I'm done with all that, that's it. Once I'm done with all that, I can go to my configuration file, and Nginx made a whole bunch of changes, or not Nginx, Certbot. And you can see all the managed by Certbot you probably saw earlier. All that's added by Certbot, and it adds the rest of the stuff. It adds the linking to my my private key, to my certificate, to my SSL configurations, and adds the redirect. So I only set up the listening on port 80. It added the redirect, and Nginx set up all the rest of that stuff. Nothing too crazy here, but Nginx will do all that for us to make sure that we're set up just right. If I didn't say yes to redirect, this bottom part wouldn't be there. It would just be the top part. I said yes to redirect because I want Nginx to write that code for me because I don't feel like it. And now, we go back to our website. I'm going to refresh. We made a request, HTTP, got the 301 location, HTTPS, made the HTTPS request. We can't even access this site with HTTP. Let's force everybody to be encrypted as we should. We got our lock. We got our certificate, signed by a root CA, well, signed by a CA, which is signed by a root CA. So we're good. We got a good keychain. And we're all set up. We're live on the internet with a brand new domain name with whatever we wanted to host. Like to change this site, of course, we just go to our server and just use Docker Compose to run anything else on port 8313. Whatever's running on port 8313 on this server, that's what's going to be on thebestwebsiteever.com. So at this point, it's stuff you've been doing all semester. Just host anything, put anything on that port. The rest from Nginx onward, on the other side, on the internet side, everything's set up. We have encryption, we have a domain name, we have a server that's going to run forever. and we're good to go with this with a live deployment. In my opinion, the biggest hang up with this is having to pay DigitalOcean $5 a month. That's, I would guess, and $12 a year for a domain name. It would probably be the only hurdles. I think those are fairly small. If you have a website that you want to deploy, that you want to get out there to the world, I think it's worth it. I think that it's, I don't know, it's a hurdle, but I think that's pretty cheap for what you get. And you can see what I'm doing. I bought $5 a month for this, and I have this other one. I haven't used this one a little bit. Maybe I should get rid of that. But $5 a month, and I'm hosting as many domains as I want here. Like, you don't have to get a new droplet for every single thing you want to host. I got, what, 5, 6 now domains? And I have a few others set up that I'm just not using. For $5 a month, and then $12 a year for each domain name. If you want to get out there and start building apps and make them available to the world, there's nothing stopping you. You're there. Any questions on any of that? I wanted more questions during this. Or did that just make that much sense? I think a lot of that went quick, or maybe not. It depends if you're familiar with this stuff. If you're familiar with the command line, this probably seemed pretty easy. Maybe. Any questions on anything? I'm here to help you. I want to see you go out there and deploy awesome sites to the world. Yes.
Wait, will we use that? Are we hosting our website on your domain or?
You don't have to host it. Just run it on localhost for the demo. Yeah, this is all bonus content. You're not required to know any of this. I'd feel really bad if I taught a whole course on web applications and never showed you how to deploy a web application to the world. It only takes a lecture, so why not? All right. Yeah, get on that Piazza post and vote for what you do want to see, because y'all are really hard to read. I don't know what you want from me. I'll do anything. But yeah, I'll see everybody Wednesday, and I don't know what we're going to do yet. I'll watch the Piazza post.